One of the great pleasures of having an opportunity to be in the diplomatic arena is the collegiality you find among diplomatic personnel all over the world. And it just so happens that a very good friend of mine was the Dutch ambassador to the Soviet Union at the same time that our speaker this evening was the Egyptian ambassador to the Soviet Union. And when Joris Voss, my friend, came to the States for a dinner for his very good friends, I was glad to be among them and also to make the acquaintance then of our speaker this evening, who is now the Egyptian ambassador to the United States. Egypt, you know, is a remarkable country. Its history goes back at least 7,000 years. Extraordinary culture. Its population of almost 60 million is confined to only 5% of the area of the country, the rest being desert. The largest cities in Africa, the largest city in Africa is Cairo, with a population of approximately 14 million. Alexandria, 4 million. So one-third of the population of this great nation live in two cities. Our speaker this evening studied law at the University of Cairo. He's held numerous positions in the foreign service of his country since he joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1957. Probably the most exciting one from our perspective is the fact that he participated in the Camp David peace negotiations between Egypt and Israel. He's held the position of Director of Policy Planning in the Department of Foreign Affairs, and also the Director of Legal Affairs and International Treaties. He's participated in numerous negotiations between Israel and Egypt, including the Taba dispute. Before coming to the United States as ambassador, he served as Egyptian ambassador to Portugal, to Belgium, and to the Soviet Union during the transition period, so that he also served as the ambassador to Russia. It's a great pleasure to introduce my friend, the ambassador of Egypt to the United States, Ambassador Ahmed Maher el-Sayed.
Thank you, Ambassador Gould. Thank you, Dr. Bird, and thank you all for giving me the opportunity to come and speak to you. I have chosen as the subject of my talk to you the end of the myths in the Middle East, because I believe that if we are headed now towards a solution in the Middle East of a conflict that lasted so long, that has resulted in so many victims and so much destruction, if we are doing that, it is because people are getting rid of myths and illusions. As we all know, myths can clash with history, they can block the road of history, and only through destroying it can we allow history to proceed towards what we hope is a better future for everybody. Let me start by saying that there are two sides to every reality. And because the reality of what happened in Europe during the Second World War, the Holocaust, and the terrible sufferings that many people, and foremost amongst them the Jews, suffered under the Nazi regime, because of this, it was such a clear reality to everybody that when Israel was created, another reality was overlooked. And the first myth was created when it was said at the time that Palestine was a land without a people without a land for a land without a people. This certainly was the first myth that I would like to speak about, because this myth resulted in the world overlooking the fact that the creation of Israel, justified as it was in the minds of the Western world, was certainly not justified in the minds of the people who inhabited this area and who saw that they were being made to pay the price of crimes that they did not commit. And they saw the creation of Israel as Europe trying to get rid of its feeling of guilt by throwing the problem in the lap or on the shoulders of other people. But as years went by and Israel became a reality recognized by the world and by the community of nations represented in the United Nations, another myth was created this side on the Arab side. And that myth was that Israel did not exist. For a very long time, the word Israel was not used in the Arab world. The words used was the so-called Israel, between inverted commas, or the Zionist entity, and there was a refusal to recognize that this truth, however painful, was a reality. And from this myth resulted, and from the clash of those two myths, many wars took place in the area. I don't want to enumerate all the wars, but I want to come to the war of 1967, which saw the defeat of the Arab armies, and of Egypt in particular, before the Israeli armies. And here another myth was created. And it was created in our minds, but also in the minds of the world, that Israel was invincible, that there was no way to change this reality, that Israel was the dominant force in the area, that it could impose its will. That is why, because this myth was even introduced into our minds as Arabs, into our hearts, we found it very difficult to sit with Israel and negotiate, because we felt that we were in a position of weakness. And it was very difficult for Israel to imagine that a new situation could arise, that the possibility of coming to an agreement with the Arab countries based on other things than the will of Israel was not there. And that is why President Sadat had to do two things. He had to shatter the myth of the invincibility of Israel. And he had to shatter the myth of the impossibility of peace and the myth of the inexistence of Israel. And the war of 1973, where from the Arab point of view we achieved a great victory because our forces were able to cross the Suez Canal, to liberate part of our territories, and to overcome many of the line that had been erected by Israel. This gave the Arab countries the sense that everything is possible, that Israel is not invincible, that we can fight back, and that we can achieve positive results. But it also made it clear to us and to the Israelis that war is not the solution, that there can be no secure borders. Israel used to say that the Suez Canal was the best border that it could think of, that it was invincible. The 1973 war shattered this belief. But also it proved to us that there is no way to liberate our territory by force. And the genius of President Sadat was that he seized this moment and he decided that enough is enough, that there should be no more wars. And this is when he decided to go to Jerusalem and go to the Knesset and say, let's put an end to all the wars. A new era started then. Very difficult negotiations, I can assure you. I was at Camp David when we were prisoners of peace, as I call it, for 13 days with President Carter, with President Sadat, and with Prime Minister Begin. We were not allowed to go out of the perimeter of Camp David. We were condemned to stay together, to eat together, to watch movies together, and I can tell you, for the first 2 or 3 days, it was hell. And then, human nature being as it is, we started to move from one table to the other. We started shaking hands when we met in the alleys of Camp David. We started talking, discussing heatedly, and we started to realize that each party started to realize that the other party was not a demon. And because of the role that President Carter personally played, I don't think this is something that we will see repeated anytime. A president of the United States abandoning all other problems and questions for 13 days and sitting there to actually draft word by word an agreement between Egypt and Israel. Without this very important role, I don't think anything would have been achieved. And then, unfortunately, when we achieved this peace with Israel, and we had lengthy negotiations after that to reach the peace treaty that was achieved in March 1979, and then we had another problem about the Taba enclave, and we had a dispute. We negotiated for very long. We finally resorted to arbitration, which arbitrated in favor of Egypt. During all this time, when we had these very difficult negotiations, there was a realization that peace was the outcome, the necessary outcome. There was no other way. And after peace was concluded, the Israelis were complaining that it is cold peace. We told them there is nothing called cold peace. There is either peace or war. We had war. You cannot go from a situation of belligerency and war to a situation of love. There has to be a situation where you normalize relations, and the key word is normalization. And normal relations are not love relations, are not hate relations. They are a relationship where you can disagree and you can agree, you can shout, you can walk out, but you realize that in the end you will have to live together. And this peace between Egypt and Israel has gone through many difficulties, many dangerous moments, one of them being the invasion by Israel of Lebanon in 1982. We withdrew our ambassador at the time, but never, 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 at any moment, did we or Israel think that we would put an end to peace between us. We were quarreling like normal countries with normal relations quarrel. And this was something that was really extraordinary. But unfortunately, neither was Israel at the time ready to make peace with the rest of the Arab world. In fact, in their mind, peace with Egypt was a substitute to making an effort with the Arab countries. They considered this as a partial peace that would eliminate Egypt from the equation and make it easier for them to deal with the Arab world. But for us, this was but the beginning of a process that was supposed to lead to a comprehensive peace between the Arab countries and Israel. But at the time, the Arab countries also were not ready to do what Sadat did. They were not ready to enter into normal, peaceful relations with Israel. And myths continued to live. The first myth An Israeli myth was that there was no such thing as the Palestinian people. We have heard many Israeli politicians, intelligent ones, saying there is no such thing as a Palestinian people. Second myth was that you could make peace with the Arab world, with the Arab countries, without returning the territories occupied in 1967. The slogan of peace for peace was raised. I don't know what it means. It only meant that in the mind of some Israeli politicians, the Arab countries were to submit to the desiderata of Israel and accept to make peace with it without regaining their territories. From the Arab side, there was the myth that Israel should not exist, that we could defeat Israel, that some even thought that they could erase Israel, and that we could have peace, we could have back our territories, they could have back their territories without negotiating with Israel, without making peace with Israel, without accepting the existence of Israel. And for a very long time, those myths on both sides were an obstacle to any real understanding and to any real negotiation. There were many attempts, many efforts, but until those myths disappeared, it was impossible to reach an agreement. And even after the Bush administration initiated the Madrid conference and the parties sat together, there was no hope that they would reach anything, because the Israelis were still insisting that the Palestinian people may exist, but they had no legitimate leadership, that Israel would choose the negotiators with which it wanted to negotiate peace. Of course, this is an illusion. It is impossible. You do not choose the people, nice people, to make peace with them. And as Foreign Minister Peres said one day, you do not make peace with your friends, you make peace with your enemies. So if you are not willing to sit with your enemies, you will never make peace. The Israelis said that they did not want to negotiate with the PLO, and negotiators from the occupied territories were chosen to come and negotiate. And for months and months, everybody knew what the reality was, but many people chose not to see it. Because this delegation that came to Washington to negotiate with the Israelis, that was not supposed to represent the PLO, that was supposed to represent the inhabitants of the occupied territories, was there in Washington, communicating every hour by telephone, by fax, by messages with Yasser Arafat, receiving orders from Tunis, from the PLO. Everybody knew it, and yet the illusion was so strong that the Israelis refused to recognize it. And it was impossible to reach an agreement until it was realized that force will not solve anything, that you have to recognize the realities, and thus the Israelis and the PLO met in Oslo and reached this agreement. And what we watched on the 13th of September last year on the south lawn of the White House was the shattering of all the illusions and all the myths that had hitherto prevented an agreement. Realities were faced. Everybody realized that you cannot reach an agreement until you recognize that the other party exists, the other party has concerns, the other party has legitimate rights, and that only through finding a modus vivendi between those two peoples, the people of Israel and the people of Palestine, would you be able to reach a peaceful solution. And since then, negotiations are going on new basis. On new basis of mutual recognition, of realization that they are condemned to live together, that they have to cooperate, that they have to build together a new Middle East, or contribute at least to build together a new Middle East where blood would not have to be shed, where people would be able to cooperate and use the enormous resources of this area in order to be an asset to the world, not a liability to the world that brings it every few years to the brink of very dangerous situations. On the other fronts also, illusions were shattered. When President Clinton and President Assad met in Geneva, there was a problem between the Israelis and the Syrians at the time also, because each one thought that he could get what he wanted first. The Syrians wanted the Golan Heights, and this was the only thing they were willing to talk about. Give us back the Golan Heights. And the Israelis wanted peace, a peace agreement, a peace treaty, diplomatic relations, and this was all they wanted to talk about. And to me, this was a little strange, because in fact, they were both willing to discuss both hands or both parts of the equation, but it was a question of who would say what first. So when President Clinton and President Assad met, for the first time, the Syrian leader indicated that he was willing to enter into peaceful, normal relations with Israel. And this opened a new era of meaningful negotiations, which are taking place now in Washington. The latest reports indicate that they have not achieved many concrete results, but the hope is that when Prime Minister Rabin comes to the United States in mid-March, this will give a new impetus to the negotiation, and that he will then indicate, just like President Assad indicated in Geneva, his acceptance or his willingness to relinquish the Syrian occupied territories. I think that we are on the threshold of a new era of peace in the Middle East. It will not be forgotten that it was President Sadat's initiative in 1977 that opened the door to all these positive developments that we are watching today. And when we will have achieved peace, I think it will be recognized that the paramount and the central role that this man has played has been something that was perhaps unprecedented in our area. His courage, his vision is something that was perhaps not easily seen in 1977 or understood, but that is now understood as the peoples of the area realize that the only way is peace, that there should be no more wars, no more violence, no more victims, and that we can and we should live together and build a new future for coming generations where finally Jews, Muslims, and Christians, as they have always lived in our area, will live together in harmony, in amity, in understanding, and give an example of to the world that these countries that God chose to send his messengers and to send his messages, this area is reverting to what it has always been, a land of peace, a land of milk and honey, a land of love, a land of understanding. Thank you very much.
We thank you for your very clear and analytical and positive treatment of the situation in the Mideast. The floor will now be open for questions. I remind all of you that I know some of you are on very tight schedules, but we try to end this session at 10 minutes after 7 promptly and not before. I'll repeat the questions when necessary. The first question, the gentleman at the microphone.
New York Times for the last few weeks have been running articles about the Muslim fundamentalists in Egypt, claiming that they're becoming more and more powerful, reverting Egypt back towards Muslim tradition and away from Western society. Could you comment on the fundamentalist movement and what effect that might have in the future in the Middle East if Egypt becomes more and more fundamentalist?
You will allow me at first not to use the word fundamentalist. I'll tell you why. Because I think what the word fundamentalist means is people who would like to revert to the fundamentals of their religion, being it the Muslim religion, the Christian religion, or the Jewish religion. And there is no religion, the fundamentals of which call for violence or for murder or for assassinating people. I think the fundamentals, all religions are based on love. What we have in Egypt, as we have in many other countries, including Israel and other countries, and the United States and other European countries, are extremists who are using the pretext of religion in order to try to impose their view on the society, in order to disrupt the society, in order to they are anarchist forces, I think, that try to disrupt the life of the citizens. And in Egypt, they may call themselves Islamic fundamentalists. In Israel, they may call themselves Kach. Here, they may call themselves another name. But this is, unfortunately, a tendency that we have seen in the world lately because of many frustrations and because of the difficulties of life. We have seen that violence has become a normal or a natural fixture of life in the modern world. These people who are trying to topple the government in Egypt through violence are incapable of doing so because they represent a very small minority, and I don't think that what we see in the media, because Egypt has always been a quiet country, and so these incidents are taking a space in the media that they do not deserve. And as I always say, I hate body counts, but if we see the number of tourists, for instance, who were killed in Egypt during the last 2 years, they are 3. 3 tourists have unfortunately been killed. We are very sorry for the death of any one of them, but let me remind you that this is certainly less than the tourists who were killed in Miami during the last year. But it is not something that I would like to, I would not like to compare a situation to the other. I'd like to say that these people in Egypt are exploiting a difficult economic and social situation stemming from the fact that we are moving from a socialist-like society to a more liberal society. So these people who have seen this movement from socialism that failed to what I will call capitalism that has not yet yielded its results are being subjected to sacrifices that are being exploited by these anarchists, by these extremists, in order to disrupt the whole fabric of the society. We understand that. We understand that the solution is, of course, to use the force of the law against those who throw bombs and assassinate, but also to continue on the path of economic reform in order for the fruits of this reform, in order for them to trickle down as soon as possible to the man in the street and allow him to overcome the frustrations that he is feeling because of the sacrifices. And the latest threats that have come from these people are not a sign of strength. I think it is a sign of weakness, because they start to issue threats to foreigners, they issue threats to bankers, they issue threats to people who put their money in the bank. And I think these are signs more of desperation, because the police has been able to face them and to, in fact, lessen their impact on the society. So now, in a movement of despair, they are trying to frighten people away. I can assure you that we will not let them accomplish what they want to accomplish. I can assure you that the whole population in Egypt has come out against these people, because it has seen through the another illusion that they were trying to impose on the people, which is that they want to install a religious regime, an Islamic regime. And it was very clear to the population that this was not true, that what they want to do is dominate the society in order to serve interests that are certainly not the interests of the people of Egypt. And I'll give you one example. Because they assassinated and attacked these tourists, tourism has been hit very hard in Egypt, and tourism is something that constitutes the livelihood of the man in the street, not only the owners of five-star hotels, not only the owners of fancy restaurants, but the owners of small restaurants, the man who sells the newspapers, the man who, the shoeshine man, the man who sells cigarettes. So I think the impact of this attack on tourism has really hit a majority, a big number of the population. And these people has turned against these extremists and have realized what they are trying to do. So I come back to your question. I think these people are a minority. There is no chance whatsoever that they will ever take power in Egypt. I think they are no more dangerous than what I was reading yesterday in the New York Times about extremists in Israel who are trying to prevent the implementation of the agreement with the Palestinians, and who were going to prayer with a machine gun and saying that they will prevent it, they will throw all the Arabs out of Palestine, they will take all Palestine. These are crazy people, and I don't think that the policy of governments is dictated by crazy people. They are minorities, they are dangerous minorities, they are active minorities, but there is no way for them to be able to dictate the policy that Egypt will follow. Egypt has always been a moderate country. Egypt has always been a good Muslim country, but we have lived in harmony with our Christian brothers. We have been living in a very liberal society, and I don't think that anybody will ever be able to impose on us a view of the world that is 14 centuries old. We are looking to the future. We are a moderate country. We will build the future, and our future will certainly not be dictated by those who throw bombs or assassinate bystanders, Egyptian or foreigners alike.
Yes, sir.
Your Excellency, if we may look back at the past for a minute, I've heard it said about, in terms of the '73 war, that the Egyptian forces did not go as far east as they might have. They did not cross the Gitla and Midi passes. And it's been debated whether this was a consequence of following a static Soviet military doctrine, or was this a deliberate decision simply to show that the Israelis could be beaten on the ground, but not to attempt in one stroke the liberation of Sinai? Would you care to comment on what happened in the '73 war? Was this, did the Egyptian army not advance as far as it intended, or was this a deliberate decision to halt far west of what it might have attained?
I will try to comment, although I'm certainly not a military expert. What I will say is that the Egyptian army went as far as it found it possible to go. Had we seen it possible to liberate the rest of the Sinai by force, I think we would have done it. But I think this was a realistic view of what could be achieved. And it was very important to realize that what we wanted to do was, in fact, to reach peace, either through liberating our country or through shattering the myth of the invincibility of Israel and convince the Israelis themselves that it is not true that the Suez Canal is the best border that they could have. And so I would say that the answer is that it was a combination of all the elements that you mentioned, but we consider that we achieved our goal and that it was only through the 1973 war that we opened the door to meaningful negotiations that led to peace with Israel. So I think it was maybe it was President Sadat who said that it was the war to end all wars. I think this was said about something else, but it was really the war that ended all wars between Egypt and Israel. So it was a war for peace. I hope that we will not have in the future to go to more wars in order to have peace. I hope that we will have peace through negotiations in the future.
Mrs. Hassler?
On Sunday, the New York Times had an interesting essay about the definition of the Middle East and about how the Balkan states, the Levant, the Turkish countries of the former Soviet Union are really all interrelated, and what happens in Bosnia, for instance, affects what might happen in the Levant. I wonder if you could comment on that and how the Levant affects the Balkans, vice versa, and the Turkish republics of the former Soviet Union.
This was a very learned comment that I also read in the New York Times. I don't want to enter into academic discussions about what geographically or historically or politically the Middle East is. What I will say is that the whole world has become, as they say, a small village, that what happens in one part of the world impacts on what happens on the rest of the world, and that certainly what is happening in Bosnia has had an impact on our immediate area for many reasons, and maybe not for the reasons that were mentioned in the article, but let me give you the example of Bosnia, for instance. I want to be very candid and very honest. Because the world did not react to the events in Bosnia and to what we consider as the genocide of the population of Bosnia, there was a feeling in the Muslim world that because the majority of the Bosnians is Muslim, Europe did not move because it did not want to see a Muslim country in the middle of Europe. And this perception, be it true or untrue, has been utilized by the extremists in countries like Egypt who use religion to further their own agenda to say that the West is against the Muslims and we have to fight back and we have to combat everything that is Western. So in fact, what is happening in Bosnia is something that impacted on the view of people in the Arab countries and the Muslim world. What happened in Afghanistan was also very important because it was represented as the Russians or the Soviets fighting Islam. So it encouraged many people to stand against the Soviet Union. So whatever happens in any part of the world impacts on the rest of the world. As to what the Middle East is, in fact, I think when we speak about the Middle East, at least in my part of the world, we think about the Arab world and we add Turkey and Iran and the Persian Gulf. I don't think we can really say that what happens in Uzbekistan or Azerbaijan or Kazakhstan directly impacts what happens in the Middle East. But there is a relationship. There are principles that are at play here and there that may be common, but I would not want to complicate a very complicated area, add the complications of the former Soviet Union to the complications of the situation in Iraq, to the complications of the situation in Algeria, to the complications of the Arab-Israeli conflict. I think we have enough to worry about in what was traditionally the Middle East, not to suddenly make it bigger and annex many of the problems and take it upon ourselves to consider them problems that are directly related to the Middle East. So I think academically this is a very appealing view, but to politicians, I think they have enough to worry about, not to try to worry about things that are far away.
Mr. Blum?
Mr. Ambassador, do you think there's any way to draw Libya into the peace process?
There must be a way, but I don't know how. We have had our problems with Libya, we in Egypt. We have now come to a modus vivendi. We are trying to push Libya to reintegrate the international community by taking steps and actions that are required in order to show that it is willing to play by the rules of the game. We will continue to exert these efforts, and we hope that we will be successful. I don't know when, I don't promise you anything, but I think that one day we will see Libya participate in the peace process. But before having Libya participate in the peace process, we have to make peace succeed between the countries directly involved, since Libya is not directly involved. We would like to see agreements between the Syrians and the Israelis, the Jordanians and the Israelis, the Lebanese and the Israelis. We would like to see the success of the agreement between the PLO as representative of the Palestinian people in Israel. It is still difficult. There are many, many problems that are still facing these negotiations, but I always look at it from the bright side and say that it reminds me of a train that is going to a predestined station that everybody knows where the train is going, but aboard the train people are fighting, shouting, and exchanging fists, but they know that where they are going to peace. So we do not want to get more passengers on this train at this moment to add their fists to the fists that are already used.
Ms. Burke?
It's actually not a question, Excellency, but I must tell you this as a great, great respecter of your culture and your country. I'm your past president, Omar Sadat, and now of you, and also as a world citizen, I hope, but as an American Jew. I want to thank you so much for the measured sensitivity of your words. I'm forever in your debt for the things that you have to say tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm very touched by your words, and I think that we, Egypt and Israel, are cooperating in trying to promote the peace that we would like to see established in the area. President Mubarak has been very active in promoting what we call the historical reconciliation between Jews and Arabs in the area. And I think he has done a lot. We are doing a lot. He is cooperating with Prime Minister Rabin and and Foreign Minister Peres. And you know, the people of Egypt have always been, as I said, moderate people. We have always been calling for understanding and for righting wrongs. And it is clear, and everybody recognizes, that the Palestinian people have been subjected to a wrong. And now this is being righted, and I think Israel has now accepted the fact that they have to live together. The Palestinians also have accepted the fact that they have to live together. We all have to help them achieve this aim. Egypt is doing it. I know that the Jewish community in this country is doing it, that the public opinion in Israel is a strong believer in this possibility. And I think that we will see together, hopefully soon, the realization of all our hopes. Thank you very, very much for what you said.
Yes, sir. Would you care to comment on any major issues, or rather myths or reality versus realities, that may be applicable to another part of the Middle East? I know you're focused on the one between Israel and its surrounding, its neighboring countries. I refer to the areas covering Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia. What are some of the major myths and realities that cover that area, apart from the presence of Israel in the Middle East?
There are realities and there are myths there. I think the reality is that Iraq and Iran are important countries in the Middle East. That they can play a positive role if they want to, and that they could contribute to the building of the world that I was speaking about, and that is a world where understanding and cooperation prevails. Unfortunately, they both are prisoners of myths. The Iranians have an old myth and a new myth. An old Persian myth, which is to impose their domination on the Gulf and be the predominant factor or the predominant country in this area. This is the old myth. The new myth was brought by Khomeini, and they think that they have established an Islamic republic, which is neither Islamic nor a republic, in my opinion, and they are trying to impose their view of Islam, which is a wrong view on the whole area. So I think that they cannot at the moment play a role as we would have liked them to play. As to Iraq, I think it is still under the illusion that it can defeat the whole world, that it can impose its domination, that it can resist the will of the international community. So both countries are countries that potentially could play an active and positive role, but which in the present conditions can certainly not play any such role. And we have to see to it that we can help them overcome their illusions and accept the facts and accept to be part of the civilized world and to cooperate with the other peoples of the area. Saudi Arabia is a very important country that is moving towards a more modern society. You have seen that the king has lately issued decrees creating what is an embryo of a parliament. You have seen that this country has opened itself to influences from the West during the Gulf War, and I think there is a very positive evolution that is taking place in Saudi Arabia. On the external field, I think Saudi Arabia is playing a most positive role in promoting peaceful activities. It is participating in the multilateral negotiations concerning the Middle East, and I think that Saudi Arabia is a very positive influence on the situation in the Middle East. So here, I think we have a reality, which is a country that is willing and desirous to play a very positive role in encouraging the promotion of peace and in cooperating very strongly with other countries and with the United States in particular. I think you have seen how in the last few days another manifestation of the close cooperation, of the desire of strengthening the ties between Saudi Arabia and the United States has been shown by the deal on the modernization of the fleet of Saudi Airways. So I think that this part of the Middle East is extremely important. We hope that we will see further positive developments in this area. And until Iran and Iraq accept to play by the rules of the game, I don't think we will consider them as part of any effort to build the new Middle East that we are thinking of.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Excellency, I wonder if you could give us some perspective about your statements about the Israeli attitude toward the Palestinian people in the light of one of the beginning factors of this situation, namely the 1948 partition proposal of the United Nations, which would have, if it had been allowed to come into being, given the Palestinians a country at that time?
I said at the beginning that there are two sides to every reality. I can understand very well the desire of the Jewish people, after having been subjected for hundreds of years in Europe to pogroms and to the Holocaust. I can understand their desire to have a state of their own. But I would beg of you to try to understand the feelings of the Palestinian people who for centuries had been living on this land and who are told one day that because the Europeans has made the Jews suffer, because the Europeans have exterminated 6 million Jews, now you have to give half of the land that you are living in to these poor victims of the Holocaust. As a Palestinian, I am sure you would certainly have resented such a proposal. You would certainly have said at the time, I cannot give half of my land to these people. I commiserate with them. Let Europe solve the problem that Europe has created. That was a normal feeling, and I think that you will find it understandable at the time that the Palestinian people should, in 1947, refuse the partition of Palestine. No country would accept easily, no people would accept easily such a situation, whatever the circumstances. But Israel was created by the will of the international community. It took the Palestinian people a very long time to accommodate themselves with this reality, but they had to overcome it. They had to accept the fact that Israel existed. They had to find a way to live with it. But the most tragic thing was that at the time when the Jews from Europe came, they also came under the illusion that there was nobody in Palestine, that Palestine was a land without a people. And this made the thing even more dangerous, because we have seen what the attitude of some of the extremists in Israel today. They are still negating the existence of the Palestinian people, and they are saying, let's throw all these Arabs away because this is the land of Israel, Eretz Israel, the greater Israel. I think if we look at the past, we will see many, many very painful episodes. With hindsight, we might say they should have accepted partition in 1947. We may say that it was clear that resisting the will of the international community would only bring years of war and miseries. But this we can say in hindsight. But at the moment when this thing happened, I think the reaction of the Palestinian people was certainly understandable. And what we hope now is that we forget the past and the miseries of the past and the tragedies of the past and look together to the future. Because for the first time, the Jews and the Arabs in Palestine and the Palestinians are not looking at each other in anger. They are cooperating. They are looking together towards building the future. They are partners for the first time. So let us try to forget the miseries and the tragedies of the past and look to what we hope will be a brighter future. Both of them are ready for it. Both of them are working for it. And when I see them together, when I see the negotiators, when I see the spirit, the new spirit with which they talk to each other, I think we have been able to overcome the past and that we can look to the future with hope. And not only hope, but with certitude that the new era that we have been calling with all our heart is nearer than we would have thought a year ago.
Do you believe that the other countries of the Middle East, Syria and Jordan and so forth, understand the differentiation between making peace with Israel and recognizing Israel and the problem of the Palestinians? Or if the land problem is settled, that they will understand that there is a need to make peace. It's not enough just not to make war.
No, everybody is willing to make peace. I am sure, I know, for many reasons. One of them is that history in this area has proved that wars do not solve anything, that you cannot achieve anything. Neither was Israel by force able to defeat the will of the Arab countries, nor were the Arab countries through force able to dislodge Israel from where it is. So it is not only an optimistic view, it is also, it stems from what I would call the pessimism of both sides, that they cannot achieve by war what they want to achieve. And I think everybody in the area itself is ready for peace now. And I can assure you that we will live, I hope, that we will both live together to celebrate peace, comprehensive and just peace, and a new era of cooperation between all the peoples of the Middle East. We have lived together for very long. We have cooperated. I mean, this area where, as I told you, God chose to send his messengers, has been an area where there is a lot of spirituality that can certainly overcome old hatreds and old prejudices.
Your Excellency, by way of thanking you on behalf of the audience, I would just simply reiterate Ms. Burke's earlier eloquent reference to your bringing to us reason and a sense of humanity, which we do think is reflected indeed in your great figure of the 20th century, Anwar Sadat. And we express our gratitude to you for what has been, I think, a very educational and positive evening. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.